The power of positive self-talk. Transform your inner voice into your greatest strength. Written and published by Fearless Audiobook. Introduction. Before the world hears your voice, before your actions shape your future, there is another conversation already happening inside you, quietly, constantly, relentlessly. It is the voice that greets your failures, questions your worth, predicts your downfall, and sometimes steals your courage before you even begin. And for many people, that inner voice becomes the loudest force in their lives. But what if the same voice that has been holding you back could become the source of your strength? What if the words you tell yourself each day could build confidence instead of fear, peace instead of pressure, and courage instead of doubt? This audiobook is about that transformation. It is about learning how to recognize the harmful patterns of negative self-talk, understand where they come from, and begin replacing them with words that heal, strengthen, and empower. Because the truth is simple. Your life does not rise or fall only on talent, luck, or circumstance. It is deeply shaped by the story you tell yourself when no one else is listening. By the end of this journey, you will see that your inner voice is not your enemy. It can become your greatest ally, your quiet strength, and the foundation of a more confident, resilient, and meaningful life. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Voice That Shapes Your Life. There is one voice you hear more than any other. It speaks before you wake up in the morning and follows you long after everyone else has gone to sleep. It comments on your appearance in the mirror. It judges your performance after a meeting. It whispers during moments of uncertainty and celebrates or criticizes you after every success or failure. That voice is your inner dialogue. Most people never stop to question it because it has been there for as long as they can remember. It feels familiar, almost invisible, like the background music of life. Yet, this quiet conversation influences nearly every emotion you experience, every decision you make, and every goal you choose to pursue or abandon. Imagine waking up tomorrow with two different inner voices. One says, "You'll probably fail today. Don't expect too much." The other says, "You don't have to be perfect. Just do your best and you'll learn something valuable." Nothing about your day has changed. Your job is the same. Your responsibilities are the same. Your challenges are the same. But the conversation inside your mind is different. Which version of you is more likely to take action? Which version will handle setbacks with resilience? Which one will notice opportunities instead of obstacles? The answer is obvious. Your inner voice doesn't simply describe your reality. It helps create it. This doesn't mean positive self-talk magically removes problems or guarantees success. Life will still test you. You will still face disappointment, rejection, and uncertainty. But the way you speak to yourself determines whether those experiences become permanent roadblocks or temporary lessons. Think about a child learning to ride a bicycle. If every small mistake is met with the words, "I'm hopeless, I'll never get this right," frustration quickly replaces determination. Eventually, the child may stop trying altogether. But imagine that same child saying, "I'm getting better every time I practice." Falling is part of learning. The bicycle hasn't changed. The challenge hasn't changed. Only the conversation has changed. And that conversation changes everything. Psychologists have long understood that our thoughts influence our emotions, and our emotions influence our behavior. When your inner dialogue is filled with encouragement, your brain becomes more willing to face challenges. When it is filled with criticism, fear, and doubt, your brain begins to treat ordinary situations as threats. This is why two people can experience the exact same setback, yet respond in completely different ways. One person thinks, "This proves I'm not good enough." The other thinks, "This didn't go as planned, but I can improve." The event is identical, the interpretation is completely different. Your inner voice acts like a personal narrator, constantly explaining what every experience means. Unfortunately, many of us have allowed that narrator to become unnecessarily harsh. Instead of offering guidance, it delivers judgment. Instead of building confidence, it creates insecurity. Instead of encouraging growth, it predicts failure before we've even begun. Perhaps you've heard that voice say things like, "You're not smart enough. Everyone else is doing better than you. Don't even try. You'll embarrass yourself. You always mess things up." After hearing those messages repeatedly, they stop sounding like opinions and begin feeling like facts. But they aren't facts. They're habits, and habits can be changed. The remarkable thing about the human mind is its ability to adapt. Every time you repeat a thought, you strengthen a mental pathway. The more often you travel that path, the easier it becomes for your brain to follow it again. This is why negative self-talk can feel automatic. It has been practiced thousands of times. The good news is that positive self-talk works the same way. Every encouraging thought, every compassionate response, and every empowering belief creates a new mental pathway. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. You may not fully believe the new words you're telling yourself. That's perfectly normal. Growth often feels unnatural before it becomes effortless. Consider how athletes prepare for competition. Long before they step onto the field, they rehearse success in their minds. They imagine themselves performing well, recovering from mistakes, and staying focused under pressure. They understand that the conversation before the performance influences the performance itself. Your daily life deserves the same preparation. Before walking into an interview, your inner voice matters. Before starting a difficult conversation, it matters. Before pursuing a dream, taking a risk, or making a major decision, it matters. Every day, your inner dialogue is quietly casting votes for the person you are becoming. This is why awareness is the first step toward transformation. You cannot change a conversation you never notice. Over the next few days, begin listening to yourself without judgment. Notice how you respond when something goes wrong. Pay attention to the words you use after making a mistake. Observe how you speak to yourself when you compare your life to someone else's. Don't try to change everything immediately. Simply become aware. Awareness creates choice, and choice creates change. Throughout this audiobook, you will learn how to replace self-criticism with self-respect, fear with courage, and doubt with confidence. But none of that begins until you recognize one powerful truth. The voice inside your head is not just describing your life, it is helping shape it. The question is no longer whether you have an inner voice. The question is whether that voice is becoming your greatest obstacle or your greatest strength. Chapter 2. Meeting your inner critic. Have you ever made one small mistake and immediately heard a voice say, "You always mess things up"? Or perhaps you looked at someone else's success and thought, "You'll never be as good as they are." Maybe you failed once and quietly concluded, "This is why you'll never succeed." If those thoughts sound familiar, you've already met one of the most influential characters in your life. Its name is the inner critic. The inner critic isn't a real person. It has no face, no physical form, and no independent existence. Yet it can feel more convincing than any voice you hear from the outside world. It comments on your appearance, questions your abilities, magnifies your failures, and minimizes your achievements. It rarely celebrates your progress because it is always searching for your next mistake. The strange thing is that the inner critic usually doesn't believe it's hurting you. In its own misguided way, it believes it's protecting you. Imagine someone who says, "Don't apply for that promotion, you'll only embarrass yourself." On the surface, it sounds discouraging, but beneath those words lies a hidden intention, avoiding rejection. The inner critic often assumes that if it convinces you not to try, you can't fail. If you never dream big, you can never be disappointed. If you stay small, you remain safe. The problem is that safety without growth slowly becomes a prison. You begin avoiding opportunities not because you lack ability, but because you've listened to the wrong voice for too long. Where does this inner critic come from? It isn't something you were born with. Think back to childhood. As children, we naturally explore, experiment, and make mistakes without questioning our worth. A toddler learning to walk falls hundreds of times but doesn't conclude, "I'm terrible at walking." They simply get up and try again. Somewhere along the journey of growing up, many people begin attaching mistakes to their identity. A harsh comment from a parent, an unfair comparison with a sibling, a teacher who focused more on weaknesses than strengths, a bully who repeatedly attacked confidence, a painful failure, an embarrassing moment. None of these experiences alone necessarily create an inner critic, but repeated often enough, they become internalized. Over time, the voices of others slowly become your own voice. The criticism that once came from outside begins echoing from within. Without realizing it, you inherit beliefs that were never meant to define you. Perhaps someone once called you lazy. Years later, even after working hard, your inner voice still whispers, "You're not doing enough." Maybe you were told you weren't intelligent. Now every challenge feels like proof that you never were. Perhaps one failure convinced you that success belongs to everyone except you. The original event is long gone, but the story remains. Our brains are naturally wired to pay more attention to negative experiences than positive ones. Long ago, this helped human beings survive by remembering danger. Today, however, that same survival system often exaggerates emotional threats. One criticism can outweigh 10 compliments. One failure can overshadow years of progress. One embarrassing moment can replay in your mind for decades. The inner critic feeds on this negativity. It collects evidence that supports its beliefs while ignoring everything that contradicts them. If you receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism, which one do you remember before going to sleep? For many people, it's the criticism. That isn't weakness. It's simply how an untrained mind operates. But here's something important to understand. Your inner critic is often a terrible storyteller. It takes one mistake and turns it into a lifelong identity. It says, "You failed," then quietly changes it into, "You are a failure." Those two sentences are completely different. The first describes an event. The second attacks a person's identity. One leaves room for growth. The other shuts growth down completely. The inner critic also loves comparisons. In today's world, comparison has become easier than ever. Social media allows us to witness the highlights of thousands of lives every day. We compare our ordinary moments with someone else's carefully selected victories. The inner critic eagerly joins the conversation. Look at their career. Look at their confidence. Look at their relationship. Why can't you be like them? What it never tells you is that every person is fighting battles you cannot see. Confidence can hide insecurity. Success can hide loneliness. Smiles can hide pain. Comparison is built on incomplete information, yet the inner critic treats it as undeniable truth. Another tactic it uses is perfectionism. It convinces you that unless something is perfect, it isn't valuable. If your presentation wasn't flawless, it was terrible. If your workout wasn't complete, it didn't count. If your business isn't instantly successful, you're not capable. Perfectionism sounds ambitious, but it often disguises fear. When perfection becomes the standard, progress begins to feel like failure. The inner critic thrives under impossible expectations because impossible expectations guarantee disappointment. Fortunately, meeting your inner critic is the first step toward reducing its influence. You cannot challenge a voice you refuse to recognize. So instead of believing every critical thought, begin observing it. When you hear yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough," pause. Ask yourself, who is speaking? Is this objective truth, or is this simply the familiar voice of an old fear? Often you'll discover that your inner critic repeats the same handful of stories in different situations. It isn't creative. It simply replays old recordings. The more aware you become of those recordings, the less power they have over you. Awareness creates distance. Distance creates freedom. And freedom creates the possibility of change. The goal isn't to silence your inner critic overnight. It has been speaking for years. Instead, your goal is to stop treating it as the ultimate authority. It can have an opinion without having the final word. In the chapters ahead, you'll learn how to replace criticism with encouragement, fear with wisdom, and self-doubt with self-belief. But before a healthier voice can emerge, you must first recognize the one that has been speaking all along. Meeting your inner critic isn't the end of the journey. It's the moment you finally realize that the loudest voice in your life doesn't have to be the one you follow. Chapter 3. The hidden cost of speaking against yourself. Words have power. We often think about the words we say to others, but rarely stop to consider the words we say to ourselves. Yet the truth is simple. The voice you hear most often is your own. If that voice constantly criticizes, doubts, and condemns you, it slowly shapes the way you see yourself and the world around you. Negative self-talk is not just a collection of unpleasant thoughts. It is a habit that quietly influences your emotions, your confidence, your relationships, and your future. Many people underestimate how damaging self-criticism can be because it feels so familiar. They assume that calling themselves lazy, stupid, or not good enough is simply being realistic. They believe that harsh self-judgment will motivate them to work harder or avoid mistakes. But the opposite is usually true. Constant criticism drains motivation rather than creating it. It weakens confidence instead of strengthening it. It creates fear instead of courage. Imagine a talented employee who dreams of becoming a manager. Every time an opportunity for promotion appears, a familiar voice whispers, "You're not leadership material. Someone else is more qualified." Although this employee has the skills and experience to succeed, those words create hesitation. They avoid applying for the promotion, convincing themselves they need just one more year of preparation. Years pass, and less qualified people move ahead while they remain exactly where they started. Their greatest obstacle was never a lack of ability. It was the story they kept repeating to themselves. This is one of the hidden costs of negative self-talk. It steals opportunities long before life has a chance to test your potential. Instead of discovering what you are capable of, you reject yourself before anyone else has the opportunity to believe in you. Negative self-talk also changes the way you experience failure. Failure is a natural part of growth. Every successful person has experienced setbacks, disappointment, and rejection. The difference is not that successful people fail less. It is that they interpret failure differently. A healthy inner voice says, "This didn't work. What can I learn?" A critical inner voice says, "This proves I'll never succeed." One response encourages growth. The other creates hopelessness. Over time, this pattern affects emotional well-being. Every critical thought adds another drop to a bucket of stress and anxiety. One negative thought may seem harmless, but hundreds of them repeated every day create a heavy emotional burden. You begin expecting rejection before introducing yourself to someone new. You expect failure before beginning a project. You assume criticism before anyone has spoken a word. Eventually, fear becomes your default response because your inner voice has trained your mind to anticipate the worst. This constant emotional pressure also affects your body. When your brain repeatedly interprets everyday situations as threats, it activates your stress response. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tighten, your breathing becomes shallow. While this response is useful during genuine danger, living in a constant state of self-created stress exhausts both the mind and body. You may feel tired without understanding why, overwhelmed by small problems, or emotionally drained after ordinary conversations. Often, the battle is not happening around you, it is happening within you. Negative self-talk can also damage relationships. The way you speak to yourself often influences the way you interact with others. Someone who constantly feels inadequate may struggle to accept compliments because they don't believe them. Another person may become overly defensive because criticism from others confirms what they already tell themselves. Some avoid close relationships altogether, fearing that people will eventually discover their flaws. In reality, the greatest barrier to connection is often the belief that they are unworthy of love or acceptance. One of the most painful effects of harsh self-talk is that it slowly convinces you to shrink your dreams. You stop applying for jobs that excite you. You hesitate to share your ideas. You remain silent in meetings even when you have valuable insights. You postpone starting a business, writing a book, or learning a new skill because a voice inside says, "People like you don't succeed." Little by little, your world becomes smaller, not because life closed the doors, but because your inner critic convinced you not to knock. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is that negative self-talk often becomes invisible. After repeating the same thoughts for years, they no longer sound like opinions. They sound like facts. Statements such as, "I'm not creative," "I'm bad with people," or "I'll never change," begin to feel like permanent truths. Yet these are conclusions, not realities. They are stories shaped by past experiences, disappointments and fears, not accurate descriptions of your potential. Fortunately, the mind is remarkably adaptable. Just as repeated criticism can shape your beliefs, repeated encouragement can reshape them. Every time you challenge a negative thought instead of automatically believing it, you weaken its influence. Every time you replace "I can't" with "I'm learning" or "I'm not good enough" with "I'm growing every day," you begin building a healthier inner dialogue. The change may feel small at first, but like water carving through stone, consistent positive self-talk gradually transforms the landscape of your mind. This transformation does not happen because you ignore reality or pretend life is easy. It happens because you choose to become your own source of encouragement instead of your own harshest critic. You begin treating mistakes as lessons instead of life sentences. You replace impossible perfection with meaningful progress. You stop measuring your worth by every temporary setback and start recognizing your capacity to grow. The hidden cost of speaking against yourself is far greater than most people realize. It quietly steals confidence, joy, courage, opportunities, and peace. But once you recognize that cost, you also discover something hopeful. The voice that has been holding you back is not permanent. It is a habit, and habits can be changed. The conversation inside your mind is shaping your future every single day. The question is no longer whether your inner voice is influencing your life. It always is. The real question is this: will that voice continue to limit your potential, or will it become the force that helps you discover just how much you are truly capable of? Chapter 4. You are not the voice in your head. Imagine sitting beside a river and watching leaves float downstream. Some leaves move quickly, others drift slowly, but none of them stay forever. Now imagine that each leaf represents one of your thoughts. Some thoughts are joyful, some are fearful, some are encouraging, and others are deeply critical. You notice them, but you don't jump into the river to chase every leaf. You simply watch them pass. Your thoughts were never meant to become your identity. Yet this is exactly what many people do. They experience a negative thought and immediately believe it. A single sentence appears in the mind, "I'm not good enough," and within seconds it feels like a fact. The thought is no longer something they observe. It becomes something they are. This is one of the greatest misunderstandings about the human mind. You are not your thoughts. You are the person who experiences them. There is an enormous difference between saying, "I am a failure," and saying, "I'm having the thought that I failed." The first statement defines your identity. The second simply describes a passing mental experience. That difference may seem small, but it has the power to change your entire life. Every day, your brain produces thousands of thoughts. Some are useful, some are creative, some help you solve problems, others are completely irrational. You cannot control every thought that appears, just as you cannot control every cloud that crosses the sky. But you can decide which thoughts deserve your attention. Unfortunately, many people have spent years treating every negative thought as absolute truth. Imagine walking past a stranger who suddenly says, "You're incapable of success." Would you instantly believe them? Probably not. You would question their judgment because they don't know you. Yet when the same sentence comes from inside your own mind, you often accept it without hesitation. Why? Because the voice sounds familiar. It has spoken to you for years. Familiarity, however, is not the same as truth. A lie repeated 1,000 times does not become reality. It only becomes familiar. One of the reasons negative thoughts feel so convincing is because they often arrive with strong emotions. When you feel anxious, your mind searches for reasons to justify that anxiety. When you feel embarrassed, your brain looks for evidence that supports the feeling. Soon, emotions and thoughts begin feeding each other in an endless cycle. You think you're not capable. That thought creates fear. The fear makes the thought seem even more believable. The stronger the emotion becomes, the stronger the thought appears. Breaking this cycle begins with one simple practice: observation. Instead of immediately believing every thought, learn to notice it. The next time your mind says, "You're going to fail," pause before reacting. Ask yourself, is this a fact or is this simply a thought? That single question creates space between you and your inner critic. Within that space lies freedom. Freedom to choose a different response, freedom to challenge old beliefs, freedom to stop living according to thoughts that were never true. Consider someone preparing to give a presentation. Moments before walking on stage, their mind begins racing. Everyone will notice your mistakes. You're going to embarrass yourself. You don't belong here. If they believe those thoughts without question, anxiety takes control. Their confidence disappears before they even begin speaking. Now imagine a different response. Instead of believing the thoughts, they quietly say, "These are fear-based thoughts. They don't predict the future. I can acknowledge them without obeying them." The nervousness may still exist, but it no longer controls the outcome. This is not about pretending negative thoughts don't exist. It is about refusing to give them authority over your identity. Think about the weather. Some days are sunny, other days are filled with storms. Yet no one believes the weather defines the sky itself. The sky remains unchanged. Thoughts are like weather. Your awareness is the sky. Fear comes, joy comes, doubt comes, confidence comes, every thought arrives, every thought leaves. But the awareness beneath them remains steady. Understanding this changes the way you respond to difficult moments. Instead of saying, "I am anxious," you begin saying, "I'm experiencing anxiety." Instead of saying, "I am worthless," you recognize, "I'm having a thought that questions my worth." These small shifts remind you that emotions and thoughts are temporary visitors, not permanent identities. This perspective also makes self-compassion possible. When you stop identifying with every negative thought, you stop attacking yourself for having them. You realize that experiencing fear does not make you weak. Feeling doubt does not make you incapable. Having negative thoughts does not make you a negative person. It simply makes you human. Every remarkable person you admire has experienced moments of uncertainty. Leaders, athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators have all faced inner doubt. The difference is not that they never heard critical thoughts. The difference is that they refused to let those thoughts become the final truth about who they were. Your mind is a powerful tool, but it is not always an accurate storyteller. Sometimes it exaggerates danger. Sometimes it remembers failures while forgetting victories. Sometimes it predicts disasters that never happen. If you automatically believe every story your mind tells you, you give away your freedom. But when you become the observer instead of the prisoner of your thoughts, something extraordinary happens. You begin responding instead of reacting. You choose wisdom instead of impulse. You replace fear with curiosity. You stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and begin asking, "What can I learn from this moment?" That shift changes everything. The goal of positive self-talk is not to eliminate every negative thought forever. That isn't realistic. Even the strongest minds experience moments of doubt. The goal is something much more powerful. It is learning that you always have a choice about which voice you follow. The voice of fear will still speak. The voice of comparison will still appear. The voice of your inner critic may still whisper old stories. But those voices no longer have to define you, because you are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening. And once you realize that, you gain the power to choose a different conversation, one built on truth, compassion, courage, and hope. That new conversation is where real transformation begins. Chapter 5. Rewriting the story you tell yourself. Every person carries two stories. The first is the story of what has happened to them. It includes childhood memories, successes, failures, heartbreaks, victories, disappointments, and lessons learned along the way. That story is made up of facts and experiences. The second story is far more powerful. It is the meaning you give to those experiences. Two people can live through the same event and walk away with completely different beliefs about themselves. One person loses a job and concludes, "I'm a failure." Another loses the same job and says, "This chapter is over. Now it's time to discover something better." The event is identical, but the story is different. And it is the story, not the event, that shapes the future. Your mind is a natural storyteller. Every experience becomes part of an ongoing narrative about who you are, what you're capable of, and what you should expect from life. The problem is that many of these stories were written during moments of pain, fear, embarrassment, or disappointment. Instead of being temporary explanations, they became lifelong beliefs. Perhaps you failed an important exam years ago. Instead of thinking, "I wasn't prepared enough," you began telling yourself, "I'm just not smart." Maybe someone rejected you in a relationship, and the story became, "I'm not lovable." Perhaps a business failed, and you quietly decided, "Success is for other people, not me." These stories often begin with a single painful moment, but they grow stronger every time you repeat them. Think of your mind as a garden. Every thought is a seed. If you continue planting seeds of self-doubt, fear, and criticism, those beliefs eventually grow into thick weeds that cover everything else. After years of repetition, the weeds become so familiar that you mistake them for the natural landscape. But gardens are not permanent. Neither are your beliefs. What has been planted can also be replaced. The first step in rewriting your story is recognizing that your current narrative is not the only possible version. Many people believe their inner dialogue is simply an accurate description of reality. In truth, it is often an interpretation filtered through past experiences. Imagine reading a novel in which the main character makes one mistake in the first chapter. If the author wrote, "Because of this mistake, the character would fail at everything for the rest of their life," you would probably think it was poor storytelling. Yet many people write exactly that kind of story about themselves. One failure becomes an identity. One rejection becomes proof of unworthiness. One setback becomes a prediction of the future. Life is far more complex than that. Human beings grow, they adapt, they learn, they change. Your story deserves to reflect that truth. One powerful way to begin rewriting your narrative is by paying attention to the language you use every day. Certain words quietly reinforce limiting beliefs. I always, I never, I'm just, that's the way I am. These phrases sound harmless, but they close the door to growth. When someone says, I'm just bad with people, they stop trying to improve their communication skills. When they say, I always quit, every future challenge becomes evidence that the statement is true. Notice how different it feels to say, I'm learning to communicate better, or I'm becoming someone who finishes what they start. The second version leaves room for growth. It gives your future permission to be different from your past. This doesn't mean pretending that difficulties never happened. Positive self-talk is not about denying reality. If you've made mistakes, acknowledge them. If you've experienced pain, honor it. If you've failed, learn from it. But don't allow temporary events to become permanent labels. A mistake is something you did. It is not who you are. Consider the story of a young woman who dreamed of becoming an entrepreneur. She launched her first business with excitement and hope, but within 2 years it failed. The financial loss was painful, but the emotional damage came from the story she created afterward. She repeatedly told herself, I'm terrible at business. I'm not meant to succeed. For years, she avoided every new opportunity because she believed that story. Then one day she looked back at her experience from a different perspective. She realized that her business had not failed because she lacked potential. It failed because she lacked experience in marketing, financial planning, and leadership. Those were skills, not permanent character flaws. That single realization changed everything. Instead of saying, I'm a failed entrepreneur, she began saying, I'm an entrepreneur who learned valuable lessons through failure. The facts stayed the same. Only the story changed. Years later, she started another business using the knowledge she had gained. This time it succeeded, not because life became easier, but because her inner narrative became stronger. This illustrates an important truth. You cannot change yesterday, but you can change the meaning yesterday holds over your life. Another powerful technique is to challenge your assumptions with evidence. Whenever your inner voice says, I'm not capable, ask yourself, what evidence supports this, and what evidence contradicts it? You'll often discover that your mind has ignored years of progress while focusing on one difficult moment. Maybe you believe you're not resilient, yet you've already survived heartbreak, disappointment, uncertainty, and countless challenges. Maybe you think you're not brave, yet you've started new jobs, had difficult conversations, cared for loved ones, and kept moving forward during hard times. The evidence of your strength has been there all along. Your inner critic simply refused to notice it. As you rewrite your story, it is also important to become intentional about the future chapters. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me? Begin asking, who am I becoming? That question shifts your focus from the past to the future. It transforms your identity from something fixed into something evolving. Every encouraging word you speak to yourself becomes another sentence in your new story. Every act of courage becomes another paragraph. Every lesson learned from failure becomes another meaningful chapter. Little by little, the old narrative loses its power. The new one grows stronger. Remember, rewriting your story is not something you do once. It is a daily practice. Some mornings, the old voice will return, reminding you of every mistake you've ever made. When it does, don't argue with it endlessly. Simply return to the truth. You are not defined by your worst day. You are not limited by your past. You are not trapped by the story you've been telling yourself for years. Every sunrise gives you another opportunity to write a different sentence. Every challenge gives you another opportunity to choose a stronger belief. Every decision becomes another page in the book of your life. The most beautiful stories are not written by people who never struggled. They are written by people who refused to let struggle become the final chapter. Your past may explain where you've been. It does not decide where you're going. From this moment forward, the pen is back in your hands. Write a story filled with courage instead of fear, growth instead of limitation, hope instead of doubt. Because the story you repeatedly tell yourself eventually becomes the life you choose to live. Chapter 6. The Language of Self-Compassion. Imagine that your closest friend comes to you after making a serious mistake. They're upset, discouraged, and convinced they've ruined everything. Would you look them in the eyes and say, "You're hopeless. You'll never get anything right. You always fail"? Of course not. You would probably remind them that everyone makes mistakes, that one setback doesn't define their future, and that they have the strength to recover. You would speak with patience, understanding, and kindness because you genuinely want to help them heal. Now ask yourself a difficult question. When you make a mistake, do you speak to yourself with that same kindness? For many people, the answer is no. Instead of offering encouragement, they become their own harshest critic. They say things to themselves they would never dream of saying to someone they love. They replay every mistake, exaggerate every weakness, and treat every failure as proof that they aren't good enough. Over time, this harsh inner dialogue becomes so normal that they no longer recognize how damaging it is. This is why learning the language of self-compassion is one of the most important steps in transforming your inner voice. Many people misunderstand self-compassion. They assume it means making excuses, avoiding responsibility, or pretending everything is fine. But self-compassion has nothing to do with lowering your standards. It means responding to yourself with honesty and kindness at the same time. It allows you to admit your mistakes without destroying your self-worth. Think of a great coach. A great coach doesn't ignore mistakes, but neither do they humiliate the athlete. They point out what went wrong, explain how to improve, and encourage them to keep going. They understand that confidence grows through guidance, not humiliation. Your inner voice should become that kind of coach. Consider the difference between these two responses after making a mistake. The first says, "You're so careless, you ruin everything." The second says, "That didn't go the way I hoped, but mistakes are part of learning. What can I do differently next time?" Both statements acknowledge the mistake. Only one creates the possibility of growth. The other creates shame. Shame has a unique way of trapping people. Guilt says, "I made a mistake." Shame says, "I am the mistake." Guilt focuses on behavior that can be changed. Shame attacks identity. When people live under the weight of shame, they stop believing they deserve success, happiness, or healthy relationships. They begin punishing themselves long after the original mistake is over. Self-compassion breaks that cycle. It reminds you that your value as a human being is not determined by your worst day. It teaches you that making mistakes is part of being human, not evidence that you are broken. Think about how children learn to walk. They fall again and again. No loving parent expects perfection on the first attempt. Instead, they smile, encourage, and cheer every small step forward. Imagine if a parent scolded a toddler every time they fell. The child would eventually become afraid to try. Yet many adults do exactly that to themselves. Every setback becomes another reason to stop trying. Every failure becomes another excuse to give up. Without realizing it, they have become the discouraging parent inside their own mind. The language of self-compassion changes that relationship. Instead of saying, "I failed again," You begin saying, "I'm still learning." Instead of saying, "I'm not strong enough," you remind yourself, strength is built through challenges. These aren't empty affirmations. They are balanced truths that encourage progress instead of perfection. One reason self-compassion is so powerful is that it reduces fear. People who constantly criticize themselves become afraid of making mistakes because they know the punishment waiting inside their own minds. But when you know you'll respond to yourself with understanding instead of condemnation, you're more willing to take healthy risks. You become more creative, more resilient, and more open to learning because failure no longer feels like the end of the story. Self-compassion also changes the way you recover from difficult experiences. Life will always include disappointment. Relationships end. Careers take unexpected turns. Dreams sometimes fall apart. During these moments, your inner voice becomes incredibly important. A critical voice says, "You should have known better. This is all your fault." A compassionate voice says, "This hurts, but you will get through it." Give yourself the same patience you would offer someone you love. Notice that self-compassion doesn't deny pain. It simply refuses to add unnecessary suffering. There is another beautiful quality about self-compassion. It reminds us that we are not alone. Every person you admire has experienced moments of fear, insecurity, failure, and self-doubt. Every successful entrepreneur has made costly mistakes. Every accomplished athlete has lost important competitions. Every confident speaker has stumbled over words. Every human being carries unseen struggles. Remembering this helps you replace isolation with connection. Instead of asking, "Why am I the only one who feels this way?" you begin to realize this is part of the shared human experience. Practicing self-compassion is not something you do once. It is a habit you build every day. Start by paying attention to your inner language. When you catch yourself using harsh or insulting words, pause and ask, "Would I say this to someone I deeply care about?" If the answer is no, choose different words. Speak with honesty, but also with respect. Another simple practice is to imagine talking to your younger self. Picture the child you once were, the child who dreamed, hoped, and simply wanted to be accepted. Would you criticize that child for every mistake, or would you encourage them to keep growing? That child still lives within you, and they deserve encouragement, not condemnation. Over time, these small changes create something extraordinary. The voice that once filled your mind with fear begins offering hope instead. The voice that once focused only on failure begins recognizing progress. The voice that once tore you down becomes the one that helps you stand back up. True strength is not found in treating yourself harshly. It is found in believing that you are worthy of patience while you grow, forgiveness while you heal, and encouragement while you learn. When you learn the language of self-compassion, you stop fighting against yourself. You become your own safe place, your own steady guide, and your own greatest source of strength. And from that place of kindness, real confidence begins to grow, not because you became perfect, but because you finally learned to treat yourself like someone worth believing in. Chapter 7. Turning everyday thoughts into daily encouragement. Transformation rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It happens in ordinary moments that most people overlook. It happens in the first thought you have after waking up. It happens in the way you respond when you spill your coffee, miss a deadline, forget an appointment, or make a mistake. It happens during the quiet conversations you have with yourself while driving to work, standing in line at the grocery store, or lying awake at night. These seemingly insignificant moments shape the quality of your inner voice far more than occasional bursts of motivation ever will. Many people believe that confidence arrives after success. They tell themselves, "Once I get the promotion, I'll believe in myself," or "Once I achieve my goals, I'll finally feel confident." But confidence rarely works that way. More often, confidence grows because of the thoughts you practice before success appears. Every encouraging word you speak to yourself becomes a small investment in the person you're becoming. Like drops of water filling a bucket, daily thoughts accumulate until they eventually shape your identity. Think about brushing your teeth. It seems too simple to matter. Missing one day probably won't cause serious problems, but neglecting that habit for months or years will have obvious consequences. Positive self-talk works in much the same way. One encouraging thought may not completely transform your life today, but repeating encouraging thoughts every day slowly changes the way you think, feel, and respond to the world. Small habits create extraordinary results because they are repeated consistently. The first opportunity to practice positive self-talk comes before your feet even touch the floor each morning. Many people wake up and immediately begin worrying. They think about unfinished tasks, financial pressure, family responsibilities, or yesterday's mistakes. Before the day has even started, their minds are already preparing for failure. Imagine replacing that habit with a different conversation. Instead of saying, "Today is going to be exhausting," try saying, "Today is a new opportunity. I don't have to control everything. I only need to take the next step." This simple shift doesn't eliminate your responsibilities, but it changes the emotional foundation from which you face them. Throughout the day, your mind constantly interprets events. You miss a train. Someone doesn't return your message. A meeting doesn't go as planned. The automatic response might be, "Nothing ever works out for me." But what if you interrupted that thought before it became a belief? Instead, you could say, "This is frustrating, but one difficult moment doesn't define my entire day." Encouragement isn't about denying reality. It's about refusing to let one event write the story of your whole life. Consider a person sitting in heavy traffic on the way to an important meeting. Their first reaction is panic. "This is a disaster. I'm going to be late. Everyone will think I'm irresponsible." Their heart races, their stress increases, and by the time they arrive, they're mentally exhausted. Now imagine the same situation with a different inner dialogue. "I can't change the traffic, but I can control my response. I'll inform the meeting that I'm running late and focus on arriving calm and prepared." The situation hasn't changed, but the experience has. Encouraging thoughts help you conserve emotional energy for the things that truly matter. One of the most effective habits you can develop is celebrating progress instead of demanding perfection. Too many people wait until they achieve a major goal before allowing themselves to feel proud. They complete 90% of the journey and focus only on the remaining 10%. This mindset creates constant dissatisfaction because perfection is always moving further away. Instead, begin noticing small victories. Celebrate finishing a difficult task. Acknowledge yourself for choosing courage instead of fear. Appreciate the days when you handled stress with patience instead of frustration. Progress deserves recognition because progress creates momentum. Another powerful daily habit is changing the questions you ask yourself. The quality of your life is often influenced by the quality of your questions. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this experience?" Instead of asking, "Why am I not good enough?" ask, "How can I become a little better today?" Questions direct attention. Your brain naturally searches for answers, so choose questions that lead you toward growth instead of discouragement. Daily encouragement also means becoming intentional about the words you use when facing challenges. Replace absolute statements like, "I can't," with more empowering ones such as, "I'm learning." Replace, "This is impossible" with, "This is difficult, but I can take it one step at a time." These changes may seem small, but language shapes perception. When your words become more hopeful, your mind becomes more willing to search for solutions instead of surrendering to problems. Gratitude is another form of positive self-talk that is often overlooked. Gratitude doesn't require ignoring life's difficulties. It simply reminds you that challenges are not the whole story. At the end of each day, instead of replaying everything that went wrong, ask yourself, what went well today? Perhaps someone smiled at you. Perhaps you solved a problem. Perhaps you kept a promise to yourself. These moments deserve your attention because what you consistently notice becomes the foundation of your mindset. It is also important to understand that encouragement should sound believable. If you tell yourself, "I'm the greatest person in the world," when you don't believe it, your mind will reject the statement. Instead, choose words that are honest and supportive. Say, "I'm improving every day." Say, "I've overcome challenges before and I can overcome this one too." Say, "I don't need to have all the answers today." Genuine encouragement builds trust between you and your inner voice. As these habits become part of your daily routine, something remarkable begins to happen. The encouraging voice that once felt unfamiliar slowly becomes your natural response. When challenges arise, your first instinct is no longer panic or self-criticism. It becomes curiosity, resilience, and hope. You begin speaking to yourself like someone who believes growth is always possible. This transformation won't happen overnight. Some days you'll fall back into old patterns. There will be mornings when your inner critic speaks louder than your encourager. That's okay. Lasting change isn't measured by perfection. It's measured by your willingness to begin again. Every time you replace one negative thought with a hopeful one, you're strengthening a new mental pathway. Every act of encouragement is another vote for the person you want to become. Never underestimate the power of ordinary moments. Great lives are not built through a few extraordinary decisions alone. They are built through thousands of small conversations that happen quietly within the mind. Every encouraging thought is a brick. Every compassionate response is another layer of the foundation. Day after day, those bricks become confidence. They become resilience. They become peace. The life you dream of is not created only by the goals you achieve. It is also created by the words you repeat to yourself every single day. Choose words that lift you instead of limiting you. Choose thoughts that strengthen rather than weaken you. Because when everyday thoughts become daily encouragement, your inner voice gradually transforms into the greatest source of confidence, motivation, and hope you will ever have. Chapter 8. Healing the wounds behind negative self-talk. Negative self-talk rarely appears without a reason. It is often the echo of an old wound, a painful experience, a harsh criticism, a broken promise, or a disappointment that was never fully healed. Many people spend years trying to silence their inner critic without ever asking where that voice came from. But if you want to transform your inner voice into your greatest strength, you must first understand what gave your inner critic its power. Imagine a tree with unhealthy branches. You could spend all your time trimming those branches, but unless you address the condition of the roots, the problem will continue to return. Negative self-talk works the same way. The words you hear inside your mind are often only the visible branches. Hidden beneath them are emotional roots that have been growing for years. Healing begins not by fighting the branches, but by caring for the roots. Many of these roots are planted early in life. A child who is constantly compared to others may grow into an adult who believes they will never be enough. A student who is embarrassed in front of classmates may carry a lifelong fear of speaking up. Someone who experienced repeated rejection may begin believing that they are unworthy of love or acceptance. These experiences may last only a few moments, but the meaning we attach to them can remain for decades. The human mind is designed to remember emotionally significant experiences. This ability once helped our ancestors survive by remembering danger. Today, however, it can also preserve painful memories long after the danger has disappeared. A single humiliating moment can replay in your mind years later, influencing your choices as though it happened yesterday. Without realizing it, you begin making decisions based on old emotional injuries instead of present reality. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that acknowledging emotional pain is a sign of weakness. In reality, avoiding pain often gives it more power. Imagine trying to cover a deep wound with a bandage without first cleaning it. From the outside, everything may appear fine, but beneath the surface, the injury continues to grow worse. Emotional wounds work in much the same way. Ignoring them does not make them disappear. They simply influence your thoughts from the background, shaping your self-talk without your awareness. Healing begins with honesty. It requires the courage to ask yourself difficult questions. What experiences first made you question your worth? When did you begin believing you were not good enough? Whose voice do you hear when your inner critic speaks? Sometimes the answers are surprising. You may discover that the harsh words you repeat to yourself today were originally spoken by someone else years ago. Over time, those voices became your own. Recognizing these influences is not about blaming parents, teachers, partners, or anyone else from your past. Most people who hurt others are carrying wounds of their own. Understanding where your beliefs came from simply helps you realize that those beliefs were learned, and anything learned can also be unlearned. One of the most powerful forms of healing is forgiveness. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It does not mean pretending that painful events never happened. It does not excuse harmful behavior or erase the consequences of someone else's actions. Forgiveness means choosing not to let past pain continue controlling your present life. It is the decision to stop carrying a burden that has become too heavy to hold. Equally important is learning to forgive yourself. Many people remain trapped by mistakes they made years ago. They replay the same memories over and over, believing they deserve to suffer because of poor decisions. But punishment does not create growth. Learning creates growth. Every mistake carries a lesson, but once the lesson has been learned, continuing to condemn yourself serves no useful purpose. The goal is not to forget your past, but to stop allowing it to define your future. Consider someone who made a financial mistake that cost them years of savings. For a long time they repeated the same sentence every day: "I'm so foolish, I ruin everything." That belief affected every decision they made afterward. They became afraid to invest, afraid to start new opportunities, and afraid to trust themselves. Eventually, they realized that one poor decision did not make them an incapable person. It simply revealed an area where they needed more knowledge and experience. When they changed their inner dialogue to, "I made a mistake, but I learned from it," they began rebuilding not only their finances, but also their confidence. Healing also requires patience. Physical wounds do not disappear overnight, and emotional wounds rarely do either. There will be days when old memories return unexpectedly. Certain places, conversations, or situations may trigger familiar feelings of fear or inadequacy. This does not mean you have failed. It simply means healing is a process rather than a single event. Every time you respond with compassion instead of criticism, you strengthen the healthy parts of yourself that have been growing quietly all along. It is also important to remember that your painful experiences are chapters in your story, not the entire book. Many people allow one difficult season to become the definition of their identity. They see themselves only through the lens of loss, rejection, failure, or disappointment. But your life contains many chapters, moments of courage, kindness, resilience, hope, and growth. Healing means choosing not to let one painful chapter become the title of your entire life. As your emotional wounds begin to heal, something remarkable happens. The voice of your inner critic gradually loses its authority. Thoughts that once felt convincing begin to sound unfamiliar. Instead of believing every negative sentence, you start questioning it. Instead of expecting failure, you begin noticing possibilities. Instead of reliving old pain, you begin creating new experiences that reinforce healthier beliefs. The purpose of healing is not to erase your past. Your past has shaped you, taught you, and contributed to the person you are becoming. The goal is to remove the unnecessary pain attached to those memories so they no longer control your present decisions. When you heal the wounds beneath negative self-talk, you create space for a different voice to emerge, a voice that speaks with wisdom instead of fear, compassion instead of shame, and hope instead of despair. Remember, healing is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It is not selfish. It is not weakness. It is an act of courage. Every kind word you speak to yourself, every painful belief you choose to release, and every step you take toward emotional freedom brings you closer to becoming the person you were always capable of being. The wounds of yesterday may explain why your inner critic became so loud, but they do not have to determine the voice that guides your tomorrow. Healing gives you the freedom to choose a new conversation, one built not on pain, but on peace, not on fear, but on faith, and not on self-condemnation, but on self-belief. Chapter 9. Speaking confidence before you feel it. One of the greatest myths about confidence is that it comes first. Many people believe they must feel confident before they take action. They wait for fear to disappear before starting a business, applying for a new job, asking someone out, or speaking in front of a crowd. They tell themselves, "When I finally feel ready, then I'll begin." Unfortunately, that day rarely comes. Confidence is not something you wait for, it is something you build. Think back to the first time you learned a new skill. Perhaps it was riding a bicycle, driving a car, swimming, or speaking in front of an audience. You probably didn't feel confident in the beginning. You felt uncertain, awkward, and maybe even afraid. Yet with each attempt, your confidence slowly increased. The confidence wasn't there before the action. It was created because of the action. This is one of the most important lessons in personal growth. Courage comes first. Confidence follows. Your inner voice plays a critical role in this process. Before every challenge, your mind begins having a conversation. One voice says, "You're not ready. You'll probably fail. What if people judge you?" Another voice says, "You don't have to be perfect. Just take the next step. You'll learn as you go." Both voices exist. The one you choose to believe determines what happens next. Imagine a young professional preparing to deliver an important presentation. As they wait outside the meeting room, their heart races. Their palms become sweaty and their thoughts begin spiraling. "Everyone here knows more than I do. I'm going to forget everything. If I make one mistake, they'll think I'm incompetent." If they continue repeating those thoughts, their fear grows stronger. Their body responds as though failure has already happened. Now imagine they interrupt that conversation. Instead, they quietly say, "I've prepared for this. I don't need to be perfect. My goal isn't to impress everyone, it's to communicate clearly and do my best." Notice something important. The fear hasn't completely disappeared, but it no longer controls the conversation. This is what it means to speak confidence before you feel it. You are not pretending to be fearless. You are choosing words that help you move forward despite fear. Many people mistakenly believe positive self-talk means convincing yourself that nothing can go wrong. That isn't confidence. Real confidence acknowledges uncertainty while refusing to surrender to it. A confident person doesn't say, "I know everything." They say, "I trust myself to handle whatever happens." There is a profound difference. One depends on certainty. The other depends on resilience. Think about athletes standing at the starting line before an important competition. Even world champions experience nervousness. Their hearts beat faster, their minds race. Yet they have learned something valuable. They understand that nervousness is not a signal to quit. It is a signal that something meaningful is about to happen. Instead of saying, "I'm terrified," they often remind themselves, "I'm prepared, I've trained for this moment." Their words influence their performance. Your daily life deserves the same preparation. Before an interview, your inner voice matters. Before an important conversation, it matters. Before making a difficult decision, it matters. Every challenge begins with a conversation inside your mind. That conversation either fuels your courage or strengthens your fear. One reason people struggle with confidence is because they confuse feelings with facts. You may feel unprepared. That doesn't mean you are unprepared. You may feel incapable. That doesn't mean you lack ability. You may feel afraid. That doesn't mean you are weak. Feelings are real, but they are not always accurate reflections of reality. Your inner voice helps you interpret those feelings. Instead of saying, "I'm scared, so I shouldn't do this," try saying, "I'm scared because this matters to me." That small shift transforms fear from an enemy into a companion. It reminds you that meaningful goals often require uncomfortable emotions. Another powerful practice is replacing predictions with possibilities. The fearful mind loves predicting disaster. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I embarrass myself? These questions keep your imagination trapped inside worst-case scenarios. Try asking different questions. What if I succeed? What if this opportunity changes my life? What if I'm stronger than I realize? Notice that neither set of questions knows the future. Both are possibilities. The difference is that one creates paralysis while the other creates hope. Confidence also grows when you keep promises to yourself. If you repeatedly tell yourself you'll exercise tomorrow, start your project next week, or finally pursue your dream someday, but never follow through, your inner voice gradually loses trust in you. On the other hand, every time you keep a small promise, you strengthen your self-belief. Confidence isn't built only through major achievements. It's built through consistent integrity with yourself. Say you'll read 10 pages, then read them. Promise yourself a short walk, then take it. Commit to making one difficult phone call, then make it. Each completed promise quietly tells your mind, "I'm someone who follows through." Over time, those small victories become the foundation of lasting confidence. It is also important to stop waiting until you feel fearless before celebrating yourself. Many courageous people still feel afraid. The difference is that they refuse to let fear make their decisions. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is choosing action while fear is still present. As your positive self-talk becomes stronger, you'll notice something remarkable. Challenges that once seemed overwhelming begin feeling manageable. Not because life has become easier, but because your inner conversation has become stronger. Your first instinct shifts from self-doubt to self-encouragement, from hesitation to possibility, from fear to faith in your ability to grow. Remember, confidence is not a gift given to a fortunate few. It is a habit developed one conversation at a time. Every encouraging word you speak before taking action becomes another brick in the foundation of your confidence. Every courageous step weakens the voice of doubt. Every challenge faced becomes evidence that you are capable of more than your fears once allowed you to believe. Don't wait until confidence arrives before pursuing your dreams. Speak confidence first. Act with courage second. Allow experience to build belief. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that the confident person you admired was created by countless moments when you chose to believe in yourself before you had any proof that you could succeed. Chapter 10. Becoming your own greatest supporter. Life has a way of testing every person. There will be moments when plans fall apart, relationships end, dreams are delayed, and unexpected setbacks leave you questioning yourself. During those seasons, encouragement from family and friends can make a tremendous difference. But there is one voice that will always be with you. even when no one else is around. It is the voice you hear in the silence after disappointment, the voice that speaks when you fail, and the voice that helps you decide whether to stand back up or stay on the ground. That voice is your own. The question is simple. When life becomes difficult, are you your greatest supporter or your harshest critic? Many people spend years waiting for someone else to believe in them. They hope for encouragement from parents, recognition from employers, approval from friends, or validation from society. There is nothing wrong with appreciating support from others. Human beings are created for connection, but if your confidence depends entirely on external approval, it becomes fragile. The moment criticism appears or applause disappears, your self-belief begins to collapse. True confidence grows from a different place. It grows when you become someone you can rely on. Imagine climbing a steep mountain. Along the way, many people cheer for you. Some encourage you, while others doubt you. Eventually, however, there will be sections of the climb where no one is around. In those quiet moments, only one voice remains. If that voice tells you you're too weak, turn back now, the journey becomes almost impossible. But if it says, take one more step, you've overcome difficult paths before, your strength begins to return. The climb hasn't changed, only the conversation has. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is becoming your own source of encouragement. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine or ignoring painful emotions. It means refusing to abandon yourself during difficult times. Many people show incredible compassion toward others while showing almost none toward themselves. They comfort friends after failure, but attack themselves after making the smallest mistake. Imagine a close friend losing their dream job. You probably wouldn't say, "This proves you'll never succeed." Instead, you'd remind them of their strengths, encourage them to keep trying, and help them see new possibilities. Why should you deserve any less kindness from yourself? Being your own supporter begins with changing the role your inner voice plays. Instead of acting like a ruthless judge, let it become a wise coach. A coach notices mistakes, but also recognizes effort. A coach gives honest feedback without destroying confidence. A coach believes improvement is always possible. Suppose you apply for a position you've wanted for years, but receive a rejection email. Your inner critic immediately speaks. You're not talented enough. This is why nothing works out. You should stop trying. If you believe those thoughts, disappointment turns into hopelessness. Now imagine responding differently. This opportunity wasn't the right one. Rejection doesn't define my value. I'll learn from this experience, improve where I can, and keep moving forward. The pain of rejection may still exist, but your hope remains alive. This is what emotional resilience looks like. Resilience is not the ability to avoid hardship, it is the ability to recover from it. Your inner voice determines how quickly that recovery happens. Another important part of becoming your own supporter is learning to celebrate effort, not just results. Society often rewards achievements while ignoring the courage it took to pursue them. But growth doesn't happen only when you succeed. It happens every time you choose to keep going despite uncertainty. Perhaps you finally spoke up during a meeting after staying silent for months. Perhaps you had an honest conversation that frightened you. Perhaps you started exercising after years of procrastination. These moments deserve recognition. Every courageous action is evidence that you are becoming stronger. When you acknowledge those victories, your mind begins associating effort with progress instead of fear. It is equally important to stop measuring your worth by comparison. Someone else may achieve success more quickly than you. Another person may appear more confident or more accomplished. But your journey is not their journey. Comparing your progress to someone else's chapter only distracts you from writing your own story. Your role is not to become someone else. Your role is to become the strongest version of yourself. Being your own supporter also means protecting yourself from unnecessary self-punishment. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone says the wrong thing sometimes. Everyone experiences moments they wish they could change. Healthy people learn from those moments. Unhealthy self-talk turns them into lifelong sentences. Ask yourself this question whenever you make a mistake. What would I say to someone I love if they were in my situation? Then offer yourself the same wisdom. That simple habit can transform your relationship with yourself. Another powerful way to support yourself is by keeping promises you make to yourself. Every time you say you'll do something and follow through, you strengthen trust in your own character. It doesn't have to be a life-changing promise. Wake up when you planned. Finish the chapter you intended to read. Take the walk you committed to taking. Each small promise fulfilled tells your subconscious mind, I can depend on myself. Trust is built through consistency, and the strongest relationship you'll ever build is the one you have with yourself. There will still be difficult days. Days when motivation disappears. Days when your old inner critic returns. Days when life feels heavier than usual. On those days, don't demand perfection from yourself. Offer patience, offer understanding, offer encouragement. Remind yourself that storms eventually pass, but the person who keeps walking through them becomes stronger because of the journey. Remember that your value does not increase because you succeed, nor does it decrease because you struggle. Your worth has never depended on flawless performance. It comes from the simple truth that you are a human being capable of learning, growing, and changing. The world may not always applaud your efforts. People may misunderstand you. Some may doubt your dreams. Others may fail to recognize your progress. But none of those voices should become louder than your own. When you become your own greatest supporter, setbacks no longer have the power to define you. Failure becomes a lesson instead of a label. Challenges become opportunities instead of obstacles. Every difficult season becomes another chance to prove that you are stronger than your fears once convinced you were. In the end, the most powerful relationship you will ever have is the one you build with yourself. Choose to make that relationship one of trust instead of doubt, encouragement instead of criticism, and hope instead of fear. Because when the world becomes uncertain, the strongest foundation you can stand on is the unwavering support of your own inner voice. Chapter 11. Creating a life guided by positive self-talk. Positive self-talk is often introduced as a tool for confidence, but its real power reaches far beyond the moments when you need motivation. It does not simply help you feel better for a few minutes or give you a temporary boost before a challenge. When practiced consistently, it begins shaping the way you think, the way you respond, the way you choose, and the kind of life you build. Your inner voice becomes the quiet force that influences your relationships, your work, your health, your purpose, and the direction of your future. Every major area of life is affected by the conversation you have with yourself. The way you speak internally shows up in the way you communicate externally. If your inner voice is constantly critical, fearful, and doubtful, that energy leaks into your decisions and interactions. But when your inner voice becomes encouraging, steady, and wise, it creates a different atmosphere around you. You begin approaching life with more patience, more clarity, and more courage. Positive self-talk does not just change how you feel in the moment. It gradually changes how you live. In relationships, self-talk matters more than many people realize. Someone who feels unworthy on the inside may struggle to believe they deserve love, respect, or kindness. They may settle for unhealthy treatment because their inner voice has already convinced them that better is not possible. Others may become defensive, distant, or overly dependent on approval because they are constantly trying to protect a fragile sense of self. But when you begin speaking to yourself with compassion, you stop entering relationships from a place of fear. You become more secure, more honest, and more capable of genuine connection. You no longer need to prove your worth in every conversation because you have begun recognizing it within yourself. Positive self-talk also changes the way you approach your career. Many people stay stuck not because they lack ability, but because they have spent years telling themselves they are not ready, not experienced enough, not talented enough, or not deserving enough. They hesitate to apply, speak up, lead or take risks because the inner critic keeps whispering reasons to stay small, but a healthier inner voice opens new possibilities. It reminds you that growth is part of the journey, that mistakes are part of learning, and that your current skill level does not define your future potential. When you speak to yourself with belief, you become more willing to try. And when you try, new opportunities begin to appear. Your health is also shaped by the words you repeat to yourself. Many people think of health only in physical terms, but mindset plays a powerful role in how you care for your body and mind. Negative self-talk can lead to stress, avoidance, emotional eating, exhaustion, and a lack of motivation. Positive self-talk encourages patience and consistency. It helps you respond to setbacks without giving up. It reminds you that one missed workout does not erase your progress, and one difficult day does not mean your efforts have failed. When you stop attacking yourself, you become more capable of sustaining habits that support your well-being. Purpose grows in the presence of positive self-talk as well. Every person wants to feel that their life matters, that their actions have meaning, and that their future is worth pursuing. But purpose is difficult to follow when your inner voice is filled with doubt. A person who constantly says, "I have nothing valuable to offer," will struggle to take meaningful steps toward their calling. A person who begins saying, "I may not know everything yet, but I have something to contribute," starts moving with more courage. Purpose is often discovered not in a single dramatic moment, but through repeated acts of self-belief that keep you moving forward even when the path is unclear. One of the most beautiful things about positive self-talk is that it changes the way you make daily choices. Life is shaped by small decisions long before it is shaped by major ones. The decision to wake up early, to keep learning, to speak kindly, to rest when needed, to keep going when discouraged, and to stay focused when distracted. These choices are all influenced by the conversation inside your mind. When your self-talk is negative, even simple decisions feel heavy. When your self-talk is healthy, choices become clearer. You begin asking better questions. Not why even try, but what is the next right step? Not what if I fail, but what if this helps me grow? Living a life guided by positive self-talk does not mean every day becomes easy. You will still face disappointment, uncertainty, and pain. Positive self-talk is not a shield that prevents hardship from reaching you. It is a compass that helps you navigate hardship without losing yourself. It keeps you grounded when emotions rise. It helps you recover faster when life shakes your confidence. It allows you to move through difficulty without turning against yourself. There is also a quiet dignity that comes from living this way. When your inner voice becomes supportive, you stop living as if you are constantly on trial. You stop waiting for permission to feel worthy. You stop measuring every moment by fear of failure. Instead, you begin living with a deeper sense of inner freedom. You can face challenges honestly without being crushed by them. You can admit weakness without attaching shame to it. You can strive for excellence without demanding perfection. That is a far more peaceful way to live. Over time, positive self-talk creates consistency between your inner life and outer life. The person you speak to yourself as begins to match the person you are becoming in the world. Your confidence grows, not because every problem disappears, but because your inner foundation becomes stronger. Your relationships improve because you approach others from a healthier place. Your work improves because you trust yourself more. Your health improves because you treat yourself with more care. Your purpose grows clearer because you are no longer buried under constant self-doubt. A life guided by positive self-talk is not built in a single day. It is built through repeated choices to speak with encouragement instead of condemnation. It is built when you choose honesty without cruelty, discipline without shame, and growth without self-rejection. Every time you speak kindly to yourself, you are shaping the next version of your life. Every time you challenge a limiting thought, you are opening a new path forward. Every time you choose belief over fear, you are creating a future with more strength, more peace, and more meaning. The life you want is not only waiting in distant achievements. It is being formed right now in the sentences you repeat to yourself. Change those sentences and you begin changing everything they touch. Chapter 12. Your greatest strength lives within. Every meaningful journey eventually arrives at a moment of realization. It is the moment when everything you've learned begins to fit together. Looking back, you recognize that each lesson, each struggle, and each small step forward has been preparing you for something greater. This is that moment. Throughout this audiobook, you have discovered that the most important conversation in your life is not the one you have with other people. It is the one you have with yourself. You have learned how your inner voice shapes your confidence, influences your choices, and affects your emotional well-being. You have met your inner critic, uncovered the roots of negative self-talk, rewritten limiting beliefs, practiced self-compassion, and learned to encourage yourself through life's challenges. Now comes the most important step of all, making these lessons a permanent part of your life. Transformation is not an event, it is a practice. Many people become inspired after reading a book or listening to an audiobook. They promise themselves that tomorrow everything will be different. For a few days, they speak more kindly to themselves, think more positively, and feel motivated. Then, life becomes busy again. Old habits quietly return, and before long, they find themselves repeating the same negative thoughts they worked so hard to overcome. Real transformation happens differently. It is built through consistency rather than intensity. Imagine planting a tree. You don't water it once and expect it to grow into a mighty oak overnight. You care for it day after day. Some mornings you see no visible change at all, yet beneath the surface, the roots are growing stronger. Months later, the tree begins to flourish because of the small acts of care that were repeated consistently. Your inner voice develops the same way. Every encouraging sentence you speak to yourself is another drop of water. Every act of self-compassion strengthens your roots. Every time you replace criticism with encouragement, you help a healthier mindset grow. Never underestimate the power of small daily choices. The person you become tomorrow is shaped by the conversations you have today. There will still be difficult days. There will be mornings when your confidence feels low and evenings when disappointment weighs heavily on your heart. You may hear the familiar voice of your inner critic trying to return. When that happens, don't panic. Progress does not mean never hearing negative thoughts again. Progress means no longer believing every negative thought you hear. Instead of allowing your inner critic to take control, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Remind yourself of everything you've learned. Ask yourself, is this thought helping me become the person I want to be? If the answer is no, gently replace it with a kinder and more truthful perspective. That single choice may seem insignificant, but repeated hundreds of times, it changes the direction of your life. Remember that confidence is not built by never failing. It is built by refusing to let failure become your identity. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to move forward while fear is still present. Self-compassion is not pretending you're perfect. It is believing you deserve kindness while you continue growing. These truths are no longer ideas. They are tools you can carry into every season of your life. As you continue your journey, create simple daily rituals that strengthen your inner voice. Begin each morning with one encouraging sentence. Before facing a challenge, remind yourself of your strengths instead of your fears. At the end of each day, celebrate one thing you did well, no matter how small it seems. These practices may only take a few minutes, but over time they become the foundation of lasting confidence. It is also important to be patient with yourself. Growth is rarely a straight line. Some days you will feel strong, while other days old doubts may return. That doesn't mean you are moving backward. It simply means you are human. Every person who has achieved meaningful growth has experienced moments of uncertainty. The difference is that they kept returning to the habits that strengthened them. Never compare your journey to someone else's. Every person is walking a different path, carrying different experiences, and learning different lessons. Your responsibility is not to become a copy of someone you admire. Your responsibility is to become the best version of yourself. That version already exists within you. It has been waiting beneath years of self-doubt, fear, and criticism. Every encouraging word you speak removes another layer of uncertainty. Every act of courage allows that stronger version of yourself to emerge. The world does not need another person pretending to be someone else. It needs the unique gifts, talents, kindness, wisdom, and courage that only you can offer. The greatest strength you will ever possess is not found in perfect circumstances, endless success, or constant praise from others. It is found in the quiet confidence that remains even when life becomes uncertain. It is found in knowing that no matter what challenges appear, you will respond to yourself with honesty, compassion, resilience, and hope. That is true inner strength. As this audiobook comes to an end, remember that the final chapter is not really an ending. It is a beginning of speaking to yourself with greater kindness, a beginning of believing in your ability to grow, a beginning of replacing fear with faith and criticism with encouragement. The voice inside your mind has been with you every day of your life, and it will remain with you for every day that follows. Make it a voice that reminds you of your potential instead of your limitations. Make it a voice that lifts you when you stumble and celebrates you when you succeed. Most importantly, make it a voice that always tells you the truth, that you are stronger than your fears, wiser than your mistakes, and more capable than your doubts have ever allowed you to believe. Because your greatest strength has never been somewhere outside of you. It has been within you all along. And from this day forward, let that strength become the voice that guides every step of your journey. As we come to the end of this audiobook, remember that this is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a new conversation with yourself. You now understand that the words you repeat in your mind are never just thoughts. They shape your beliefs, influence your choices, and quietly create the life you experience. Every encouraging sentence, every compassionate response, and every moment you choose hope over self-doubt is a step toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. There will still be difficult days. You will make mistakes. You will face setbacks and moments of uncertainty, but those moments no longer have to define you. Instead of asking, "Why am I not enough?" begin asking, "What can I learn and how can I grow?" Let every challenge become another opportunity to strengthen the voice that believes in you. Remember, transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens one thought at a time, one choice at a time, and one day at a time. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small it may seem. Every kind word you speak to yourself is an investment in a stronger, calmer, and more confident future. Most importantly, never forget this truth. The most influential voice in your life is your own. Make it a voice that encourages instead of criticizes, inspires instead of discourages, and reminds you of your strength instead of your fears. Thank you for sharing this journey. May your inner voice become your greatest ally, your greatest source of courage, and the quiet strength that guides you through every challenge and every opportunity life brings. Your future begins with the very next conversation you have with yourself. Make it a positive one.